What is this film about? And what is this film about?
Really about, right, yeah. So the story really starts back in 2008 in our hometown where I live in Dayton, Ohio. It starts when the huge General Motors plant in our town closes. Now that plant had provided a real basis for a blue-collar middle class, where people had a sense of security about their lives. They could send their kids to college, they could have a vacation, they had a secure pay. All that was disappearing. You know, fast forward about 7 or 8 years, and there was news, the plant's gonna reopen. Somebody bought the plant. We're gonna have manufacturing. There's gonna be jobs again. It turned out, though, that the owner and the person who purchased the plant was a Chinese entrepreneur, billionaire. And he was gonna bring over hundreds of Chinese to manage and train the American blue-collar workers how to work in his factory. You hear about globalization. And we all know that sort of the tectonic plates of the world have been changing. We filmmakers realized the tectonic plates changing is going to be reflected in that plant, in that one place where over 2,000 people work. So we thought this is going to be a real opportunity to make an interesting and relevant film.
有没有意见呢？游乐设非常热，我每个同事他非常怕热，我尽量保证能达到他的环境。 在我们的成本合理的成本之下。
So, of course, this is the first film to come out of the Obama's production company. Why was this the first story that they wanted to put out there?
My understanding is that the First Lady and the President saw the film around the time of Sundance. And they probably saw a lot of different films. And they chose our film. We did get to meet the Obamas, and we talked to them about why they chose our film.
You let people tell their own story.
I hope it sparks curiosity.
Gosh, this is fun. I think it's because it does listen, and it does listen to all these different points of view. It's not like an editorial. It's not like a partisan piece. It's not political. It's no way propaganda. It really tries to develop an understanding of many points of view. I think that's what the Obamas want to do. I think they want to tell stories. I think they want to listen. At this particular given moment in time, our country is really divided. People don't talk across political points of view. And I think our film, and I think the Obamas really want people to start sitting back, listening to each other, and trying to find common ground. The things that will take us forward as Americans into a good future, not a divisive future.
How have they been involved?
They're just involved in helping us think about how the film can have an impact on the world. And we're actually have a pretty extensive impact campaign that's going to launch in a few days. We have a tour of factory towns all across the U.S. There's going to be one in Louisville, one in Detroit, one in Indianapolis, one in Pittsburgh.
So this is going way beyond the screen now.
Oh, yeah.
What do you want people to walk away with?
I want people to walk away with a deeper sense of the human impact of the big word globalization, the impact on workers, both American and Chinese in this case, and hopefully a sense that we can talk across the divides. You know, we can talk across the Chinese-American rivalry. We can talk across the rivalry or the tension between owners, management, and workers. We have to address the rights of workers in America. The rights of workers and their sense of the future, their sense of hope, is going to really impact the future of the country. And those folks are not listened to enough. Our film really listens to and goes into detail on what the lives of regular workers are like.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.